Hello, my name is Dr. James Santa. I'm the Director of International Academics of the Common Mission Project. I'm happy to bring you Concept 6. So, as we've been working through these different concept areas, we've really been keying into the specific pedagogical elements that make an H4 course an H4 course. So, what we're going to be talking about in this particular concept is not so much the things that are uh, antithetical to H4, but really are additional add-ons that you can consider using to help along with your hypothesis testing, your beneficiary discovery process, and just really understanding how do we define what the problem is and ultimately getting to an MVP. So we're going to dive into this. So the first thing that we have here are a couple of things about what to keep in mind as you're testing your hypotheses. So when you're building these out initially and you're doing your initial beneficiary discovery, your first dozen or 2 dozen sessions, you're really trying to figure out, well, what is the problem? And you're doing so by having a lot of conversations with different individuals, beneficiaries, individuals in academia and industry, your government partners, your mentors, lots of different individuals. And you're really just getting a baseline of what it means from a problem perspective. So what I want to share here with you is there are a couple of things that come from Alex Osterwalder that define what a good hypothesis is. And I'll read through the three things here. So the first thing is it's testable. And your hypothesis is something that you have to be able to validate or invalidate. That's it. So it's an if-then statement. If we do this, or if this happens, then we expect this other thing to happen. So it's got to be testable. So if you have something that you can't test, it's not a good hypothesis. The next thing is it has to be precise. You have to know what success looks like. So the who, what, when of your assumptions. And then lastly, discrete. And the recommendation that I make there for you is that you should only be testing one, maybe two things with each of your hypothesis statements, nothing more. If they become too large, you're going to have a very, very difficult time ascertaining what it is you're trying to validate or invalidate and what you're trying to learn. And interestingly enough, you can see how this overlays with the mission model canvas. So just keep in mind that within these questions, these type of hypotheses, you've got them right here as they overlap one for one with your mission model canvas. Now, this is something called the Johari window, or what I like to call it is assumptions mapping. So the Johari window, if you want to go through this history with these things, you can absolutely do that. But what this has been done in a lot of ways in the lean and the H4 environments has been pivoted in such a way where you can take what is traditionally a psychological tool, the Johari window, and use it for assumptions mapping. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this. Now, the caveat I'd have with this is a relatively new tool to be used in the H4 environments, but I've had tremendous success with students being able to use this. And the reason for that is that it provides a way for them to show what they have learned, what they want to learn, and what they think doesn't matter to their potential problem domain, as well as a solution as they get there towards an MVP. So let's walk through this. So top left, you have evidence for this. And these assumptions that you have evidence for, you believe to be critical to not only your problem, but your solution. So these are things, again, we know that this is the truth. We've validated this through a number of different beneficiary discovery sessions. And we know that this is critical to understanding in order for us to have a palatable, viable solution at the end of your course. Moving to the top right, think of these as your active questions. So these are assumptions, these are hypotheses for which you have no evidence, but you believe that if these are not validated, that you've hit a wall, and this would require a pivot. So these are places where you can put active questions. Somebody can answer these things for you. Moving down to the bottom left, you have your not critical knowns. So these are the bottom left there. You have evidence for this. You've talked to some individuals and they provided evidence that, yes, we validated this hypothesis. However, this validation does not necessarily mean that it's critical to the success of your problem domain understanding as well as your solution. And then lastly, you have your unknown unknowns. And this is ones where you have no evidence, and you believe that based on the evidence you have collected that these assumptions really don't matter. So think about it from this way, if we can use a goofy example. Imagine tomorrow if the machines become sentient. That would change everything we know about the world around us. But is the likelihood very high that this will happen tomorrow? Probably not. But is the risk and the impact very high? Yes. So think about it from that respect, that from like a risk management perspective, perhaps, is that you're really using this to frame that, you know what, we know that these are things that could exist in the periphery, but we're not really worrying about them. Now, that being said, for those bottom two parts of this quad chart, if you start doing your hypothesis testing and your data collection through your beneficiary discovery, and these themes continue to pop up, it should give you the flag there saying, you know what, we probably should be asking these questions more frequently and seeing if these assumptions that we have about them not being necessary are indeed unnecessary. Moving over to the right-hand side, it's just a little bit of a way of reframing all of these. But what I want to call your attention to is looking at the top right where you see assumptions. And then what you have is that overlaid with the mission model canvas. So you can do your Johari window. I recommend a tool like Miro, where it's a free online collaborative tool for you and your team to be able to get in there and start tossing up these virtual sticky notes in collaboration mode as a team. If you can want to use the colors that you see here, feel free. But on the right-hand side, you also see a way of being able to approach this where the different hypotheses are color-coded based on where they fall within the mission model canvas. So there's hypotheses for desirability, for feasibility, and for viability. Really going to leave it up to you in terms of how you want to map all of this. But the big thing that you can take away from this is it shows what we learned this most reporting period, this most recent week, what hypotheses we tested, either validated or invalidated, or we have to learn more, and what are we going to do next week. This is a great resource to be able to give all that information in one slide. Now, this is your resources, partners, and activities slide. Now, not every student team is going to feel the need to use one of these. And this is one of those things where if you're thinking about, we might want to start a business with this idea that we have, this is a great resource to be able to start building out as part of your presentation materials. And what you'll see here, and this comes from the Aqualink team that you may remember from Concept 1, but this really shows who's responsible for doing what along the way, what partners are required to actually make this work, and who has the ball when, for lack of a better terminology there. So this is a great opportunity for your team to really discern and demonstrate to your sponsoring organization who has to do what when, who has which responsibilities, and when do these things kind of need to happen in order to facilitate a minimum viable product being deployable. Now, the other tools that we've looked at so far in this particular concept lecture are things that are H4 adjacent. But this is one that I would absolutely recommend that your student team create. Now, here's how I'll explain this to you. If I ask you at your university, at whatever organization you're working with, if it's a higher education for this example, who is more important, your faculty member or the custodial staff? In my experience, when we have that question, the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, the faculty member is more important. It's a very interesting perspective. Why? So you're thinking about this now, and I say, okay, well, if we came into this classroom and it was filthy, would we be able to have learning here? If the lights weren't working, if the garbage wasn't taken out, if the facilities weren't clean, if the electric bills hadn't been paid, could we have this class here? And the answer is no. So then the next flip side of that's going to be you'll end up thinking, well, then it must mean the custodian is more important. No. Everyone has their own unique roles to accomplishing a certain larger objective, a larger mission. And this is a chart that helps to identify those key players. It also identifies potential gaps in your beneficiary discovery of individuals that you may not have talked to. We're going to jump into an example that came from the Department of State. So in this example, and this is very timely given the war that Russia has currently engaged with Ukraine on, and we're looking at this from a political perspective that the president's goal, the president of the United States' goal, is to stabilize Ukraine. And then we move down to the Secretary of State, and you can see that they have their responsibilities. So think about the president as being like the CEO of this organization, in our case, the United States government. And then you look down the chain of command a little bit. So president's looking maybe 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road about what does stabilization for Ukraine look like. Secretary of State is still a pretty high level individual, still in the United States, confirmed by the Senate, but they're moving down into more of those operational and a little bit more strategic. So operational things that are happening 6 months to a year, maybe down the road, and what those things kind of look like. What are those activities that are unique to that individual to facilitate mission success for the president, which in this case, again, is to stabilize Ukraine? Move down the chain a little bit more to diplomats who are working maybe that 3 to 6 months range out, but they're also really looking at what's happening in that within the month, maybe the next 30 to 60 days, and what their responsibilities are for meeting the mission of stabilizing Ukraine. And then you move down to staff who are doing the day-to-day actions. They're not doing a lot of the innovative or strategic high-level activities, but their responsibilities are critical to getting this all right for the top of the food chain, in this case, the president. So what I want you to take away from this is that no one person is more or less important. Everyone has their unique and individual tasks that all file up towards being what is the top of the mission. And again, in this case, is stabilizing Ukraine. So please remember, no one individual is more or less important. Everybody is bringing their unique skill sets and their own unique tasks towards facilitating a positive outcome for that broader mission. This is a get, keep, grow diagram, and this again comes from a Stanford University team. But what this chart is really great at helping to facilitate is showing from a team perspective. And the recommendation I would have on this one is, you want to add this in once you've gone through the mission model canvas, you've gone through your first iteration of your minimum viable product, but you're looking here to see what does your team need to get? What are those external things that you're trying to find in order for you to actually end up getting your solution to be deployable to whichever users, whichever beneficiaries need them most? Then your keep. And these are the things that you've already found that your organization, your sponsoring organization, your team is doing well, that you just want to make sure you maintain. And then lastly, you have grow. And these are things that you actually want to be, if you have everything put in place in order to have a good solution in place and deployable and adoptable, whether it's policy or technology, whatever it may look like, is where you're going to grow. And there's some good examples here. So this is another great chart that you can use for your weekly presentations to demonstrate, again, what areas that you're paying attention to for your problem domain and what you potentially have to grow in order to determine the efficacy of an end solution. Now, these next two slides come from Strategizer from Alex Osterwalder again, but these are really helpful during a beneficiary discovery. So imagine this as being a hypothesis tester. This is going to be your transcript, in some ways, your written down notes from your beneficiary discovery sessions. And these can be used for all of your beneficiary discovery sessions, regardless of that person's a beneficiary or if there's an academic or somebody in industry, whatever it looks like. So this just gives you a step-by-step what you can fill in the box, have one of these for each person that you speak with. And then similarly to this, you have the testing card. And this is really a testing card for each of your hypotheses. So this is something that I would absolutely suggest having, that while you may have that other card that we saw previously for each of your interviews, have one of these for each of your hypotheses that you can use in each of your interviews and find out where you're starting to get data saturation points to determine, yep, we're on the right path for defining our problem domain and getting to a solution. And that is the end of concept 6. We'll see you for concept 7. Thank you.